Sometimes I wonder how different everything might have been if my dad hadn't passed away that spring morning. I was only 6, but it feels like it happened yesterday. Dad was making pancakes, his Sunday specialty. He always shaped them into funny faces that made me laugh. Mom was setting the table, humming a tune that has faded from my memory. "Lily, princess, come help your old man flip these masterpieces," Dad called, waving his spatula like it was a magic wand. I jumped off the couch, leaving my favorite stuffed bunny behind, and dashed to the kitchen. That's when it happened. The spatula fell to the floor, and Dad clutched his chest, his face contorted in pain. Everything after that is a blur of ambulance sirens, hospital corridors, and Mom crying. Just like that, my father was gone, leaving an empty house that felt too spacious and too silent. Mom didn't cry for long, though. She met Richard at a community support group for widowed parents. He seemed nice enough, tall, with kind eyes, and a gentle smile reminiscent of Dad's. Within a year, they were married, and he moved into our home. I was trying to adjust to having a new father figure when Mom dropped another surprise. She was pregnant. I remember her glowing face as she told me I would be a big sister. I was 8 when Tommy was born, and that's when everything shifted. That's when Mom quit her job as an elementary school teacher. "Tommy needs me," she'd say whenever anyone questioned her decision. These early years are crucial for a child's development. I wanted to ask about my early years, about whether they hadn't been crucial too, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I watched as Mom's world gradually shrank to revolve entirely around Tommy. She'd forget to pack my lunch for school, then act surprised when I mentioned being hungry at dinner. "Oh, I'm sorry, sweetie," she'd say distractedly, already turning back to Tommy. It wasn't just once or twice. It became our new normal. Richard noticed. I'd catch him watching Mom with a worried frown as she fussed over Tommy, completely ignoring me at the dinner table. One evening, as I sat alone doing my homework, he joined me. "You know, Lily," he said quietly while helping me with my math problems, "sometimes people get so caught up in one thing that they forget to see what else they might be missing." As Tommy grew older, the tension in our home became impossible to overlook. Richard tried talking to Mom countless times about her fixation on Tommy, but it always ended the same way, with Mom getting defensive and angry. I remember one particular evening when Richard brought it up during dinner. Tommy was about 5, pushing his food around his plate while Mom hovered over him, trying to convince him to eat just one more bite. "Sarah," Richard said, putting down his fork, "we need to talk about this. You can't keep hovering over him like this. He needs to learn to do things on his own." Mom's expression immediately hardened. "What are you implying? That I'm a bad mother?" "That's not what I meant, and you know it," Richard replied, keeping his voice calm. "But you have 2 kids here, not just one. And a husband too, by the way." I pretended to be very interested in my mashed potatoes, but I was hanging on every word. "Tommy needs me," Mom snapped. "He's still so young." I muttered under my breath. I was young too, but nobody seemed to hear me. The situation escalated when Richard suggested enrolling Tommy in Little League Baseball. I was sitting on the stairs, supposedly doing my homework, when I overheard them arguing in the kitchen. "Absolutely not." Mom's voice was shrill. "Do you know how dangerous baseball can be? He could get hit by the ball or twist his ankle. For God's sake, Sarah, he needs to experience life. You can't protect him from everything." But Mom wouldn't budge. Instead, she signed Tommy up for art classes at the community center. I still recall Tommy's sullen face as he sat there, mindlessly dragging his brush across the paper while the other kids genuinely tried to learn. He quit after 3 sessions, and Mom blamed the teacher for not appreciating her son's creative spirit. Meanwhile, Richard began spending more time with me. Perhaps it was his way of balancing out Mom's behavior, or maybe he just saw a kid who needed someone in her corner. He took me to my karate classes 3 times a week, attending every session, cheering louder than any other parent when I earned my belts. But while I thrived under Richard's attention, Tommy became increasingly difficult. He'd leave his room in complete disarray, toys and clothes strewn everywhere, and Mom would turn to me with that look I had come to dread. "Lily, be a dear and clean up Tommy's room," she'd say, not really asking, but telling. One day, Richard caught wind of this arrangement. "She's not his maid, Sarah," he protested. "He needs to learn to clean up after himself." That's when Mom burst into tears, wielding her ultimate weapon. "I knew it. You love her more than your own son. How can you treat Tommy this way?" I watched Richard's expression fall, saw the fight leave his eyes. He looked at me apologetically, then raised his hands in surrender. "Fine, have it your way," he said quietly, walking away. After that, he stopped arguing with Mom about Tommy, but the look he gave me said everything. He hadn't given up on me, even if he had given up on fighting with Mom. It was a small comfort, but sometimes small comforts are all we have. High school graduation day was bittersweet. As I stood in my cap and gown scanning the crowd, I spotted Richard beaming with pride. Mom was there, too, but she kept checking her phone, probably texting Tommy's babysitter. Later that evening, Richard called me into his study. "I've been saving up," he said, pulling out a folder filled with college brochures. "You can go wherever you want, Lily. The sky's the limit." Before I could respond, Mom burst in. "You can't be serious," she exclaimed. "That money should be saved for Tommy's future. He's going to need it more." Richard's face hardened, an expression I had come to recognize during these confrontations. "This is non-negotiable, Sarah. I've already made my decision." I ultimately chose Marshall University in West Virginia, far enough to start anew, but close enough for occasional visits. The day Richard helped me move into my dorm, Mom couldn't come because Tommy was anxious about her leaving. College life was exactly what I needed. For the first time, I felt free from the shadow of being the less favored child. I called home weekly, but most of my conversations were with Richard. Mom was always too busy with Tommy. "Your brother's going through a tough phase," Richard explained during one of our calls, his voice sounding weary. "He's hanging out with some kids from the wrong side of the tracks. I tried to get him involved in after-school programs, but..." "Let me guess," I interrupted. "She said you were being too hard on him?" "Exactly. She called me a tyrant for suggesting he might need some structure." Richard sighed. "She says I don't understand how sensitive he is." My visits home became less frequent as Tommy's behavior deteriorated. When I did visit, he barely acknowledged my presence, holed up in his room with his video games. The few times I caught glimpses of him, he looked pale and angry, his eyes glued to various screens. After graduation, I landed a job at Deloitte in their consulting division. I stayed in West Virginia, building my career while watching from afar as my brother sank deeper into self-imposed isolation. During one of my rare visits home, I knocked on his door. "Tommy, want to grab lunch? My treat." All I heard in response was the sound of gunfire from whatever game he was playing. Mom, passing by in the hallway, just shrugged. "He's not feeling social today. He's very stressed, you know." The contrast between our lives couldn't have been starker. While I was pursuing my career goals, Tommy was chasing virtual achievements, supported by Mom's endless excuses. Richard's disappointed expression said it all, but by then, even he had largely given up on intervening. By 27, I had finally saved enough for a down payment on my own place. It wasn't huge, just a one-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood, but it was mine. The day I got the keys, I couldn't stop smiling. All those years of saving, of brown bag lunches, and saying no to designer clothes had finally paid off. "You all have to come see it," I said during my weekly call home. "I'm having a house-warming party next Saturday. I'll cook dinner, Richard. I'm even making your favorite lasagna." "Wouldn't miss it for the world, kiddo," Richard replied warmly. Mom's voice cut in on the other line. "Oh, honey, I don't think we can make it. Tommy has plans that day." "Plans?" I couldn't hide the skepticism in my voice. "What kind of plans?" "Very important ones," Mom said vaguely. I could hear Tommy's video game blasting in the background. On the day of the housewarming, only Richard showed up. He brought a potted plant and a bottle of wine. "Your mother sends her love," he said. But we both knew that was a lie. Over dinner, Richard filled me in on what was really happening at home. Tommy, now 20, hadn't bothered with college and spent his days either gaming or hanging out with his drinking buddies. Richard had tried to help, offering him a position at his construction company. "Just as a starting point, you know," Richard explained, twirling pasta on his fork. "Everyone needs to begin somewhere, but—" He shook his head. "Sarah said it would be beneath him. Can you believe that? She claimed our Tommy was too intelligent for manual labor." "Too intelligent to work, but not too intelligent to mooch off his parents?" I muttered. Richard gave me a sad smile. "I keep trying, Lily. God knows I keep trying." That was the last real conversation we had. 2 years later, I received the call that changed everything. Richard had collapsed at work. Massive heart attack, just like my father. By the time I arrived at the hospital, he was gone. The funeral felt surreal. Mom put on quite a show, sobbing dramatically and telling anyone who would listen how wonderful Richard had been. "We were so happy," she wailed. "How will we manage without him?" I watched her performance with a mix of disgust and pity. Her tears weren't for Richard. They were for herself. I could see the wheels turning behind her grief-stricken facade. Richard had been the sole breadwinner. Without his income, how would she maintain Tommy's lifestyle? Tommy didn't even bother to wear a proper suit to the funeral. He showed up in wrinkled khakis and a polo shirt that had seen better days. He spent most of the service staring at his phone while Mom made excuses for him. He's processing his grief in his own way. Standing there at Richard's grave, I couldn't help but think about how history had repeated itself. Another father figure, another heart attack, another funeral. Only this time, I was old enough to see everything clearly, including the fact that Mom's tears were more about her bank account than her broken heart. A year after Richard's death, I had mostly lost touch with Mom and Tommy. What little I knew came from Aunt Linda's occasional calls. "They're getting by on Richard's savings," she told me. "Your mom sold his Chevrolet last month. The tools from his workshop went before that." I tried not to care. I really did. But when Mom's number flashed on my phone one Tuesday evening. My heart still skipped a beat. "Lily?" Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. "I need you to come home, please." Something in her tone compelled me to book a flight for the next day. When I pulled up to our old house, I barely recognized it. The once pristine lawn that Richard had meticulously maintained was overgrown with weeds. Paint peeled from the window frames, and one of the shutters hung crooked. But the house wasn't the only thing that had aged poorly. Mom opened the door, and I had to suppress a gasp. The vibrant woman I remembered had been replaced by someone who looked 20 years older than her actual age. Deep wrinkles lined her face, and her hair, which she had always kept perfectly colored and styled, showed stark gray roots. "Come in," she said, leading me into the living room. The house smelled musty, and dishes were piled in the sink. A thin layer of dust covered everything. This from the woman who used to make me rewash plates if she spotted a single water spot. "Mom, what's going on?" I asked, settling onto the couch. A spring dug into my thigh, another thing Richard would have fixed immediately. She broke down almost immediately. "We're running out of money, Lily. My pension barely covers the utilities and the savings." She twisted her hands in her lap. "They're almost gone." "What about Tommy? Is he helping with expenses?" Mom's face danced between embarrassment and defensiveness. "He's looking for work. It's not his fault. These employers just don't understand him. The last place wanted him to start at 8 a.m. You know, Tommy's not a morning person. And the one before that expected him to do manual labor. With his intelligence, I felt my jaw tightening. Mom, at his age and with no experience, he can't exactly be picky. You don't understand." She interrupted, her voice rising to that familiar pitch that always preceded a defense of Tommy. Then, abruptly, her tone shifted. "Lily, we need your help. We won't survive without it. I hate to ask, but you're doing so well in your career." I knew what was coming. Part of me wanted to refuse, to remind her of all the times she'd chosen Tommy over me. But looking at her worn face, trembling hands, and desperate eyes, I couldn't. "How much do you need?" I asked. When she said $1,500 per month, I nearly choked. That was a significant chunk of my salary, but I found myself nodding anyway. "Where's Tommy now?" I asked as I prepared to leave, already regretting my decision. "Oh, he's at a job interview." Mom brightened slightly. "A very promising position with a tech company." Through the window, I could see Tommy's bedroom light on and the familiar flicker of his computer screen. Something never changed. True to my word, I set up an automatic transfer of $1,500 to Mom's account every month. Each time I saw that deduction from my bank balance, I told myself it was the right thing to do, even if it meant postponing my own plans for a bigger apartment or a new car. I started visiting more frequently, though each visit felt like stepping into a time capsule. Tommy was always there, either glued to his computer screen or sprawled on the couch with a beer in hand. "How's the job search going?" I'd ask. "Mind your own business," he'd snap, or sometimes just grunt and turn up the volume on his game. During the holidays, I couldn't stand seeing the living room in such disrepair. The wallpaper was peeling, and there was a water stain on the ceiling that would have driven Richard crazy. So I spent my Christmas bonus hiring contractors to fix it up. When Mom sprained her ankle in February, I called to check on her. "Oh, it's not so bad," she said, though I could hear the pain in her voice. "Is Tommy helping you?" busy with some online interviews. I hired a home health aide the next day. The money I'd been saving for a vacation went to cover her wages for the next 3 weeks. Then came the day I walked into the house and found a stranger sprawled across our sofa. She looked like she'd stepped out of a reality TV show. Fake nails that could double as weapons, heavy makeup, and clothes that left little to the imagination. She was scrolling through her phone, surrounded by empty chip bags and soda cans. "Who are you?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I knew the answer. Tommy emerged from his room. "This is Candy," he announced. She lives here now." Candy didn't even look up from her phone, just popped her gum loudly. I watched in disbelief as she reached into the grocery bag I'd just brought and helped herself to the premium cookies I'd bought for Mom. "Nice to meet you too," I muttered under my breath. Later that evening, I called Mom to get her take on the situation. "Oh, Lily." She sounded more animated than I had heard her in months. "Isn't it wonderful?" Tommy's finally settling down. Candy's been such a good influence on him. He hasn't gone out drinking with those awful friends in weeks. That's because she's drinking all my imported beer at home, I thought, recalling the empty bottles I'd seen in the recycling bin. But I held my tongue. "And he's talking about getting a job," Mom continued excitedly. "Candy's cousin knows someone at a tech startup. Tommy says it could be his big break." I made non-committal noises, reflecting on the dozens of big breaks Tommy had mentioned over the years. But Mom was so happy, living in her bubble of perpetual hope, that I didn't have the heart to burst it. My next visit home started like any other. I juggled grocery bags as I pushed open the front door, only to stop dead in my tracks. The house looked like a tornado had swept through it, dirty dishes piled high in the sink, takeout containers scattered across every surface, and clothes strewn about the living room floor. Candy lay sprawled on the couch, her perfectly manicured nails tapping away at her phone screen. She didn't even look up as I set down the groceries. "You know," I said, my voice sharp, "you live here rent-free, eating food that I pay for. The least you could do is wash a dish or two." She looked up slowly, a smirk playing across her heavily glossed lips. "Who do you think you are to come in here giving orders? This isn't your house." "I grew up here," I shot back. "You're just a guest." That's when she laughed, a harsh, triumphant sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, honey, you've got it all wrong. This house belongs to Tommy now. Your mom signed everything over to him. There's a will and everything. I found Mom in the kitchen, organizing coupons she never used. Is it true?" My voice sounded strange in my own ears. "Did you make a will, leaving everything to Tommy?" She wouldn't meet my eyes at first, fiddling with the papers in front of her. Then something seemed to harden in her expression. "Yes," she said flatly. "It's true. I don't understand." The words came out barely above a whisper. "I'm the one helping you. I'm the one sending money every month. Tommy doesn't work. He doesn't contribute anything. Don't you dare talk about your brother that way." Mom's voice rose sharply. "You don't understand him. You never have." "Understand what? That he's a parasite? That he's perfectly content to live off my money while his girlfriend trashes our home? Oh, stop being so dramatic." Mom's face twisted into something I didn't recognize. "You want to know the truth? I never loved you the way I loved Tommy. He's better than you in every way that matters. And I don't want to see you here anymore." The words hit like physical blows. All those years I told myself that Mom did love me. She just showed it differently. That somewhere beneath her obsession with Tommy, she cared about me too. Now I knew better. I turned and walked out, Candy's triumphant laughter following me down the hall. 21 years of hoping, making excuses, and trying to earn my mother's love. All of it ended with the quiet click of a door closing behind me. The drive home from Mom's house was a blur. I don't remember the 4-hour trip. Don't remember climbing the stairs to my apartment. Don't even remember sitting down on my couch. But I do remember the moment of clarity that came as I stared at my phone's banking app. The automatic transfer to Mom's account with $500 every month for the past year. My finger hovered over the screen for a moment before I decisively clicked Cancel Recurring Payment. For the next few weeks, I threw myself into work, trying to ignore the hole in my budget that suddenly felt like an opportunity rather than a burden. I started researching investment options for the money I'd been sending home. Maybe I could finally start saving for a house of my own. A real house, not just an apartment. Then, exactly 1 month after my last visit home, Mom called. The money didn't come through, she said without preamble. No hello, no how are you. There must be some mistake with the bank. There's no mistake, I replied, surprised by how steady my voice was. I canceled the transfers. There was a moment of stunned silence before she exploded. You what? How dare you, after everything I've done for you? I actually laughed at that. Everything you've done for me. Like what, Mom? Forgetting my existence, forcing me to be Tommy's maid, telling me you never loved me. That's different, she shot back, using her familiar Tommy defense tone. You know I was upset, but you can't just stop helping us. We're counting on that money. Tommy and Candy are planning a vacation to Cancun. A vacation? I interrupted, my voice rising. Tommy needs a vacation? From what exactly? Playing video games? Drinking beer? Let me tell you something, Mom. Tommy doesn't need a vacation. He needs a job. How dare you speak about your brother that way? You're just jealous because what? Because you left everything to him? Fine. You made your choice. Now he can take care of you. You ungrateful, mercenary little... The rest of her tirade dissolved into a stream of accusations and demands. I let her rant for a moment before speaking again. Goodbye, Mom. Don't call me again. I blocked her number before she could respond. But Mom wasn't done. Over the next few weeks, the messages started pouring in through every possible channel. Facebook messages about how she was struggling to pay bills. Instagram comments about what a terrible daughter I was. Emails detailing all the sacrifices she'd made for me, most of which I couldn't remember happening. Tommy joined in too, sending aggressive texts about how I was destroying the family. Mom's crying because of you, he wrote. You better start sending money again or else. I blocked him too, but not before replying, here's a crazy idea. Try getting a job. Candy even tried reaching out through LinkedIn, of all places, with a long message about how I was breaking my poor mother's heart and how Tommy was too sensitive to handle the stress of work right now. I had to admire her creativity, at least. It's been 6 months now. I don't know how they're doing. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel guilty about that. Maybe they finally realized that Tommy needs to support himself. Maybe they're still waiting for me to cave in and start sending money again. Maybe they found someone else to manipulate. The truth is, I don't need to know. What I do know is that the $1,500 I used to send them every month has gone into a down payment fund for my own house. I know that I sleep better at night, no longer awakened by angry messages or guilt-tripping calls. I know that Richard would be proud of me for finally standing up for myself. The other day, I drove past a construction site and saw a now hiring sign. For a moment, I considered taking a picture and sending it to Tommy, but then I just smiled and kept driving. Their problems aren't my problems anymore. Finally, after all these years, I'm free.